Morning and welcome to the Budget and Finance Committee meeting of the Governing Board of Sun City West. I'll now call the meeting to order, and I have established a quorum. All committee members are either present or online with us at the moment, so we have everyone here. The minutes of March 16th, our last meeting, have been distributed. Do I have consensus to accept them as they have been presented? Is there consensus? Okay, we have consensus to accept those. Thank you. We do have a few changes we're going to make as we go through the agenda today, just in the interest of when we need to have other people on the line or need to address items, but I believe we will go ahead and get started with the March 2021 financials with Pete Finelli.
Thank you, Ann. Good morning, everyone. I was actually quite concerned for March results as we entered the month, as it's our highest revenue-generating month of the year. And obviously, we still had facility closures at the beginning of the month. The budget has quite large amounts for special events, guest fees, tenant cards, bowling, all of which had some resurgence with the reopenings, but were still well below budget expectations. Golf did well, but still had some restrictions on tee times and came up short by about 62,000. So all told, in the upper left-hand quadrant against budget, we were 199,000 short of budget. Expenses did come in below budget by 119,000, mostly in wages and landscape maintenance. With those savings, the operating income was short to budget by about 81,000. Again, I honestly was very concerned the results would be much worse than that and cut into our year-to-date favorable variance. So while being short to budget is obviously never desirable, the performance was better than expected. For capital-related, APF sales continued at a strong clip, exceeding a very difficult-to-achieve budget number by 7 transactions. Unrealized losses were sizable and were negatively impacted by continued valuation changes in our reserve funds bond portfolio due to recently increased interest rates. So overall, at the bottom, against a $1.3 million budget, we hit just about $1 million, so we were short by $314,000. Against prior years, in the operating portion, the revenues were up sizably, $395K, particularly in golf. Operating expenses were up $88K, so the positive variance of $307,000 in the operating margin. Against prior year, the most notable change was in the capital-related section where 1 year ago there were unrealized losses of approximately $1.8 million in the reserve funds in that very tumultuous market a year ago. So overall, the capital-related came in $1.5 million ahead, which when you add the $300,000 operating excess, $1.8 million ahead of prior year. Moving to year-to-date, you've heard many of these descriptions, and they continue to be true. Our membership has only the shortfall relative to guest fees and tenant cards, which are large components of that. Recreation is virtually non-existent now, as that's hall rentals and tours and things like that. The strength of the year, of course, has remained in golf fees and ancillary, which is the range balls and cart rentals and things like that. Sports pavilion, most notably bowling, continues to be at about 50%. Some strength in that in March's results. I think we were in the 70%. So it's starting to recover. And of course, special events like recreation are virtually non-existent. And the merchandise sales, food are 100% tied to the golf. So you expect to have, a correlation with all the golf resurgence, but we all know that the pro shops have been restricted. And so those revenues have suffered accordingly. So $867K short on budget. The good news is, in particular in wages, utilities, repair, 6-figure plus savings has resulted in a very odd number, but 555, say that a dozen times. I didn't make it that. So we believe that the entire staff of the association, as well as some things that happen organically, have allowed us to continue to have a favorable variance of $688,000 on the operating margin against budget. Continued strength in the in the year-to-date component for capital-related, particularly when you add the investment income and the realized or unrealized gains, there's about just over $1.1 million of favorable variance there. The APF's asset preservation fees I referenced continue to be a strong point of the entire current year's budget, and not as much losses on disposals or depreciation, due in part to timing issues of when we deferred some of our capital spend. So aggregate that 688 operating and the $1.8 million or so capital related, and right now we're just shy of $2.5 million ahead. Similar comps against the prior year. Operating revenues, particularly on the strength of golf, are up. Operating expenses are down, particularly in repairs, which, given some of the closures and things like that, and supplies, we've seen some organic savings. So 682 ahead of that. You may recall that I was saying that last year that $1.8 million valuation change in the reserve funds, of course, played itself over into the year-to-date against prior year. Almost $2 million in excess of prior year makes up the vast chunk of the capital-related gain APFs as well are strong. So put all those together, we have the just over 3.259 million favorable variance. So any questions on that?
Madam Chairman, I have a comment, not a question, Pete. Thank you for the good presentation on this, concise. We're at the 3/4 mark for the year, and as one who was involved in this last year, about almost this time last year, there was great concern and angst among this committee as far as what the future would hold for us revenue-wise. We even went so far as to put some restrictions on capital spend just out of prudence and fear of the unknown. I can see us getting home here, and I think we did get some help, if you will, on the golf revenue, as you correctly pointed out. But I also think somewhere along the line we ought to thank and applaud and congratulate the staff at Sun City West for the proactive approach that was taken to not only the cleanliness and good hygiene needs of the community, but also the proactive management of expenses. We're making it because of the expenses as well as the golf revenue. And I think too often we lose sight of the overall good job that's been done by many unsung heroes in the back rooms and the leadership of the committee or of the staff. So this is a shout out to all the staff from the general manager, CFO, and everybody else down through the rank and file. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Very well said, John. Does anyone else in the committee have comments, questions? Anything? Okay. Pete, do we have Hayes available yet?
It looks like they're on. I haven't heard from them yet, but it looks like they're on.
Okay, we're going to go.
I'm Barbie from Hayes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We're going to go ahead and move to item 3.08 on our agenda, as Hayes is currently available to talk to us. So I'll turn that over to Corrine and Stacy Anderson with Hayes. Thank you.
So what they do is an underwriter will look to be at anywhere from 65% profitability loss ratio goes. That is where they find themselves. As anything below that in a favorable loss ratio. So when we look at the bottom here, the loss ratio for y'all's account, the first three lines, property, commercial auto, and general liability, are with Philadelphia, and that's who your main package carrier is. And then directors and officers is outside of that. So as you can see, directors and officers has performed very, very well. There has been some claims, but there has nothing has been paid to date in the last 5 years on that. General liability, the lines of coverage with Philadelphia, mainly property that has been running a little hot. As you can see, this average loss ratio is at 81%. So running a little hot for what underwriters like to look at. But because your account's written as a whole, they take into consideration all lines. And when they're underwriting your renewal and checking to see what sort of rate they need to get for the renewal, this is what they'll look at. We can move to the next slide if there's no questions. So what is going on with the market? A lot of things. We are in a hard market right now. It has been becoming a hard market for the last few years. The losses are continuing to increase. Nuclear verdicts is one of the main things that has been affecting the marketplace with this. So I can talk about those a little bit further, but that basically means kind of what it sounds. So these just very, very large jury verdicts We see it a lot in the transportation industry, even with general liability losses. So those are continuing to be an underwriting concern as years previous, what underwriters were able to gauge in a loss, for example, they're just not able to gauge anymore because these verdicts seem to be essentially larger than the last. So if yesterday's verdict got 10 million, tomorrow's will get 15. So it's really becoming a problem with the insurance industry and is having a direct effect on insurance pricing. So if you look here at the graph, back in 2003, the median cost of a single fatality in an auto claim was at 2.1 million. Fast forward to 2019, the median cost is 5.1 million. And I can tell you, I have a good chunk, probably about half of my book of business is transportation, moving and storage clients. So I see a lot of literature on what these claims are in fatalities or vehicle claims, and what we see is much larger than that 5.1 million. Just blasting through the primary limits and excess limits upwards of $20-30 million. So it's increased 122% since 2014. So these type of claims, the uncertainty of COVID-19 claims, a lot of things that have been going on lately politically with civil unrest and vandalism claims are hitting, historic Atlantic hurricane season, California, Arizona, Colorado, wildfires, all of those things are contributing to the escalating reinsurance costs. So it's really just penetrating those reinsurance marketplaces where it hasn't in the past. So the rate increases are starting from the top and trickling down. What we're experiencing with regards to the property marketplace is that this is one of the lines that has really hardened amongst mainly every line of coverage outside of workers' compensation is the only one that we seem to be seeing kind of come in a little bit flat or favorable, with still a lot of options out there in the marketplace. With property, some concessions are not available even for commercial markets are non-renewing those accounts as a whole, forcing us to go into the surplus lines market, which is an automatic increase of rates just due to the availability of markets and their terms. Casualty, that's going to be anything that would be considered a liability. So general liability, auto liability, umbrella, which is how it sounds, that sits over the auto liability, general liability, employer's liability, and then the excess is above that. So what is contributing to these three line items is they're feeling pressure on that first layer, which is the first $1 million that you would purchase through Philadelphia. And then the umbrella excess marketplace have increasingly hardened because of the nuclear verdicts that I was talking about. So what used to maybe just hit that first layer, the first $1 million, and kind of penetrate into that first layer of umbrella, maybe a couple more million more, is now going through the total limits that insurers are offering. So whether that be 25 million in limits, we're finding that a lot of times in a claim situation, those limits are being completely penetrated. So the nuclear verdict that I spoke about earlier. Another thing that is being, can we go back to that slide real quick? Thank you. The next thing is the negligent entrustment. That is a lot of items that come up in, particularly in an auto case, for example. In the court of law, these attorneys are bringing up the fact that these employers or businesses aren't properly hiring either the right people and checking their driving records and MVRs, and/or if it's a trucking company and they're hiring somebody to do a move or a transport for them, and they hire an owner-operator that they didn't do their due diligence, and because of that, there was a claim because of the safety issues. They're pressing that these companies are a threat to society. So they're using that in the jury negotiations, and how they present their prosecution is to show that these companies aren't being safe, when maybe that's not the reality. Maybe this instance was a fluke, but they're trying to make it seem like it's an all-time thing. So that's another thing that we're seeing, which is contributing to these giant verdicts. Next slide, please. So this boils down, this is kind of similar to what we saw in the previous slides, a few slides ago. This is with regards to umbrella, where we saw the most increase in rate and premium this year amongst all of our clients, and particularly rec centers, is the umbrella. And that's, it's increased an average 22%, but I would say, depending on your particular exposure, it's much higher than that. So what we're seeing is just carriers the reasoning for the rate increases is because they're getting, these claims are just a lot larger. They're paying out policy limits that they necessarily weren't collecting enough premium on, so they're upside down with their loss ratio. Another thing that contributes is there's a lot of carriers, and we had one of your carriers in particular that forced us to go out to the marketplace. They non-renewed the account because were not comfortable with the exposure anymore. That being senior rec center with the current state of COVID-19 and risk. A lot of carriers are pulling out of the marketplace. We've been seeing this a lot, particularly with auto and transportation. The marketplace is just dwindling down to more of a handful of carriers. So that is creating an increase in the ability for markets to get rate. Another thing we're seeing is markets what they used to provide, maybe they provided $20 million in insurance for a certain premium. They're cutting their limits down to $10 million for that same premium amount. So just a very, very hard marketplace right now. Underwriters are just getting pressure from upper management and are getting rate increases across the board. Executive risk is, that's going to be directors and officers, employment practices, liability coverages. There have been a surge in directors and officers claims since 2017. California is a particular state that we see a lot of these claims, and a lot of the laws that California has put in place is creating a volatile marketplace. Rate increases have continued since 2017, upwards of 40% or more, depending on, especially if it's a public company, but we're seeing it in the private sector as well. Employment practices liability, there's been an uptick in claims, most recently in the last couple of years. The Me Too claims, Equal Pay Act, discrimination claims, all of those things were I'm sure, as you could probably tell, or if you've seen the news or anything, we're in a very litigious society right now. So just more claims, uptick of claims, and uptick of rate because of that. Cyber, this particular line of coverage has hardened within the last year and a half or so. A lot of this is coming from COVID-19 related claims, not necessarily COVID-19, but because a lot of people are now working from home, their security on their at-home systems are not as robust as they are in the office setting, creating an uptick of malware claims coming in, It's about 70,000. I think our company, IT department gets about 70,000 cyber type attack emails or something a day. So there's been an uptick in claims. There's been more, I would say, lax, when you're working from home, that the claims are coming in because there's a little bit more of a relaxed vibe, that your employees are maybe clicking on something they might normally not, or things of that nature. That being said, rec centers fared phenomenally well on your renewal. We had a flat renewal on this line of coverage over last year, which is unheard of. Most of the clients that we've seen have been getting minimal 30% increases. So outside of everything, your carrier did very well in their renewal offerings. This next part is the premium summary. So what transpired last year over this year. These initial coverages here are all with Philadelphia. So your property, inland marine, liquor liability, general liability is all written with Philadelphia. So we were benchmarking and expecting, based upon our initial conversations with the underwriter, a 20% increase across the board. So all of these lines of coverages, we were able to get with the underwriter, explain the volatility we were experiencing in the excess marketplace, and we were able to get him to come down on his initial rate increases to below 15%. Liquor liability came in at 25% less over last year, and then general liability just under 12%. So very favorable with regards to what we were expecting, and came in below the benchmark on those lines of coverages. The next one is auto, umbrella. Those two are also with Philly. So these lines of coverages, like mentioned, are the ones that have been hardening the most, where the underwriter doesn't have the ability to really get much rate decrease, and there's not a lot of negotiating room on these two lines. So he makes up for it on the other lines where he can, just because even regardless of any loss history, these lines of coverage have mandated rate increases from their home office. So where he wasn't able to budge on some of the rate, he was able to try and make up for on some of the other lines of coverage to even it out a little bit. And the last one, this is just the subtotal last year over this year. It came in line overall. So because we were able to get Philly to kind of come down on a little bit on theirs, and the cyber came in flat, that helped even it out to across the whole to make up for some of the increases on the umbrella. We had to add another additional layer to the excess because of Liberty Mutual non-renewing the account. So because of that, it has increased the premium last year over this year a little bit. And this total difference takes into account your exposures as well. So there was a little bit of an increase in exposures, which accounts for this total premium last year over this year renewal. So overall came in line in what we were expecting for as far as the renewal goes. And then our fee remained the same. That is all I have on my lines. I know it's kind of a lot of insurance jargon and a lot of information and moving parts. Is there any questions on any of this?
This is Ann, I'm the chair. I have one on the excess umbrella. It looks to me like it went from 22.5 to 51,000. That looks like a bigger increase than 2,397. Well, I can't hear what, I'm sorry.
Gap is 29,000 and about 130%, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that was,
Yeah, this one, that was
Considerable
the actual,
jump.
the last one that we bound, and I failed to catch that on the summary. But the totals at the bottom, the 83,000 is accurate.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I think the math's off a little bit on that. And that represents two coverages included. So there's actually HDI and Evanston make up for the total that Liberty was putting up last year. They had 15 million in coverage above the 10 million that Philadelphia was offering. And there was not every other option that we had was double, triple that cost between the two lines of coverage. So these two, while yes, a lot, 100% increase over last year, not ideal. We had to, in order to get the full limits that we had purchased last year, we had to have two carriers put up the limit.
Around the committee. Kathy, I believe you have a question.
Yeah, this is just related to that. I just want to be clear on, what's the coverage on the umbrella policy?
So, yes, so the umbrella with Philadelphia is 10 million.
The excess umbrella coverage.
The excess umbrella sits over that. So you have 10 million, an additional 10 million through HDI, and then the next 5 million through Evanston. So you have a total of 26 if you're including the primary auto GL with Philadelphia.
Okay, and then another quick question, if you go back and look at one of the first slides, loss ratios, it's slide 2, property, commercial, general. What are the deductibles on those?
The property deductible, I believe, is $10,000. I'd have to double check off the top of my head. I don't know. Hold on one second. I can pull it up.
Somebody-
Commercial auto, it's physical damage deductible, and it varies depending on the unit.
And general liability?
General liability is 0.
0, okay. So in looking at the increases on the deductibles, was that part of the consideration here?
We did look at an increase. Actually, I think your property deductible is $5,000, but I'll have to pull the policy
That
here.
seems pretty low.
We did look at deductible options. Typically, unless you're moving into a very large deductible, the premium savings isn't worth increasing the deductible. I can double check on our proposal, but I think the difference between the deductible for the property, increasing it from 10 to 5, and let me double check that number.
It is 5. Correct. This is
5.
Stacy. It is 5. Yeah.
Thank you. So the premium savings to increase it was, I think, maybe 1 claim. So it would have been, doesn't really seem like it makes sense. You have 1 claim and all of a sudden you're back at the premium you would have paid. So then any claim that happened thereafter would be in addition to that. So the premium savings wasn't substantial enough for that to really make sense in our opinion.
This is Stacy. For the $10,000 property deductible, the premium savings were about $4,400.
Did that answer your question?
It did, it did. And then I have one last question. As a carrier or a broker for the carriers, what have been the conversations in the risk aversion to equal pay and Me Too kind of claims?
I think we've had conversations, offering what risk control services your carrier currently offers. We haven't had conversations with your insurance team on tips and tactics to kind of avoid that, but we could certainly get our executive risk practice leader, Bill Doherty. He's always on our calls to see if there's any tools that your carrier offer, maybe any webinars. We haven't seen anything like that come through as far as carrier offerings, but would be sure to let you know if we see that come through. If there's any questions in particular you have, you can send them over and we can put together some sort of presentation and discussion to talk about how to mitigate some of those claims and avoid any of that.
Typically, you see those kind of active conversations, so I'll leave this one to the governing board as they look at possible risks to the association. So that's good, thank you.
Lisa, you have any questions?
No, I'm good. My question was under umbrella, and Kathy got it.
Thank you. John?
Could I defer? I have several, and I'd rather make sure other people get to
Okay.
voice theirs on this. And come.
Absolutely. Gary?
I'm new to the committee and therefore new to this topic, so some of my questions are out of curiosity and others are probably out of ignorance, but you don't need to respond immediately, but technical rating, I'd like to know what that means and how it's used. Have you visited Sun City West?
Technical rating.
Well, that's okay. We can, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that is referring to, but you have some context behind that. That would be great. And yes, we have visited rec centers of Sun City several times prior to COVID. Actually, you guys were our last visit before everything hit the fan, and we were actually, the last time I think it was interesting, I think we were stuck there for a week because we had Snowmageddon back here in Denver. But yes, we have visited rec centers.
Great. You know that we're kind of a benign community. A nuclear event for us is somebody got their golf cart stolen. So my takeaway from everything you've said is that we're being dragged into the morass because of all that goes around us. And as a broker, you don't seem to have a lot of latitude with the people that you're dealing with and negotiating rates at this point. You're almost portraying kind of a victim of the circumstances mentality. Am I overstating that?
Yeah, the marketplace as a whole has hardened for those that are even having favorable loss history and or favorable accounts with regards to rate, meaning there's rate increases across the board mandated down from the underwriters. Now, if you are in a poor loss ratio situation or have extreme exposure, that is going to increase those rates even more or increase the non-renewal notices that may be seen within that. And as the marketplace has hardened, we did our due diligence to make sure that the pricing that we were getting from your renewal carrier and or any carriers that we had marketed to was the most favorable. So we did a full marketing effort this year. Your account went out to several primary carriers, all of which had declined due to exposures and just their comfortability with the exposure. And then as far as the excess goes, which was the line of coverage we were feeling the most pain point on, that went out to probably 30, 40 plus markets to gauge interest, offer what pricing, the most competitive pricing that we're able to get in the marketplace. So yes, unfortunately, there's a lot of clients that are getting increases because of the marketplace and not necessarily particularly because of individual loss ratios.
Is that something we maintain ourselves, Bill? Our claim history?
We
have
do,
it?
but there's a few items on there that are client-specific people on there, so we don't. The biggest claims, quite bluntly, have been tree damage.
Oh, okay.
We had $100,000 of that 3 years ago, and another 75 in the year before that.
Good.
So
Thank you.
Harry? Okay, John, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. But the presentation was by Corinne? First of all, let me thank you. It was very informative. And I have a number of I hope, clarifying questions at this point, that's all. On your second slide, the one that's showing on our board here, the loss ratios, it just went too fast for me to understand. Is that Sun City West data?
Yes.
That's our,
Yes.
if you will, claim history?
This is your claim data and your loss ratios year over year.
Okay, good.
So the first section is the premiums.
Yes.
This next section is the losses, and then the loss ratio is determined by dividing
Yeah.
the losses by the premiums.
Perfect.
So when I was
that's
talking
great.
about a loss ratio in the eyes of an underwriter,
Yeah.
they'll look to be at about a 60 to 65%. So
Great. I just want to make sure I understood it, because the conclusion I came to was the same one that Gary came to, and that is the rather large increase is not due to our claims history, it's the environment that we're working in. And I think I heard you say 55 carriers in some cases have been solicited. So we are victims of our environment to some degree here, in fact, to a large degree. The only change I see in carriers was the Liberty Mutual bailing out of the excess umbrella, or the umbrella, let's just call it the umbrella policies that mix in there, forced you to make some changes, and that's where we see the biggest increase. What are you finding your other clients are doing about these large increases? Is there some learning here that we should know about?
A lot of clients are making the tough decision to assess their the limits that they're purchasing. We pulled a benchmarking report at the beginning of in our pre-renewal terms. We have access to pull benchmarking, and it's a little difficult with how we were able to pull it in the system that we use, just because it takes there wasn't an ability to really drill down to exactly your exposure. So what we pulled was showing that you were benchmarking as your peers as far as limits purchased. But when we talk to our clients about assessing the limits that you're purchasing, we really advise to take a look at the insurance that you're purchasing. If there was a catastrophic event, is there enough insurance to protect your balance sheet, essentially? So you all have $26 million in liability coverage. We found that to be benchmarked with your peers, and then those are the things we have our clients think about. So while it was an additional, I think $12,000, $12,500 or somewhere in those lines for that $5 million in coverage through Evanston to get you to that full $25 million. The thought process is behind that. If you were in a claim situation, and the jury verdict came in higher than that limit, and then now all of a sudden y'all are being questioned okay, what would it have been to purchase that extra 5 million? Are you going to get heat because it was, you know, you got $5 million in extra coverage for $12,500? So that's really what we take a look at when we're thinking about limits. So some clients, I had a client that decreased their limits this year. Most of my clients, like I mentioned, I have a fairly sizable moving and storage book. And they're really feeling the heat of it because they have the large semi trucks over the road, and that's where these large claims are coming in. Some of their increases were anywhere from 50, 100% plus, and that was happening last year as well. And most of them decided that they felt more comfortable keeping the limits that they had. So that is what I have seen personally in this past year.
I can tell you're working on our behalf, and you know, I know very little about the subject that you're talking. So my questions were more trying to draw out your knowledge and see if there's anything that we should be doing differently about what we're doing. So thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you very much, Corinne and Stacy. Appreciate you enlightening us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We're going to move next on our agenda to look at the Chartered Club's receivables, which is item 3.06. So I know I'm creating havoc for the people who are running our show here, but Pete?
So this is actually just a summary. If you'd be willing to, we of course have, I think Mr. Schwinn identified some of the concerns as it related to the 501c7 statuses, but ours are in two quadrants. The largest is the ARC. That's a composite of two loans that were extended to them, or receivables that were extended to them to build out their building and then to do a paint expansion. They've been drawing that down at usually a $50,000 a year clip. They have a 10-year promissory note, and until last year when they had to dwindle their payment due to the inability to have a lottery. And one of the other ones is the Rotary Club. We've talked about that quite a bit. Apart from here, this was a receivable that was being drawn down up till late part of 2018 and early 2019. And then an agreement was made to move away from the monthly payment they were making and just pay when those bricks at the Beardsley were sold. But that has had very limited action, so this one has been relatively dormant. Pickleball had approximately $350,000 receivable established when they did the RJ expansion. They've been very diligent in making the payment, and in fact, that $76,854 is a 3-year amortization. So this upcoming year will be the final installment of that. Tennis Club gets a lot of theirs through both the naming rights and the tournaments they run. They've been doing about a $5,000 a year clip, and that started off in the $40,000 range. Stained Glass made a commitment to fund a portion of the expansion over at Palm Ridge. That was established at $50,000, and they've made two $5,000 installments and have made a commitment for the 8-year and under a letter of understanding. So all told, approximately $700,000 on the balance sheet at this time.
Thank you, Pete. I might add that the receivables from the Auto Restoration and Rotary Club, those two clubs are 501c3. They are totally separate from the issue that is at hand right now with the 501c7 clubs and that the issues that are being addressed there. So those are outside of that purview in case anyone was concerned about those. So I'll start around the room. Harry, do you have any questions?
I guess my first question would be, is I've heard that in our bylaws that we are not supposed to have loans over 1 year. Is that correct?
It's a,
Pardon? Contract over 1 year. And these contracts are over 1 year? So is that issue being addressed?
That's a yes from our board chair, our governing board president, George.
Okay, so I mean, I know the C7, I've researched a lot of that, but I think there's a couple different issues there.
There are. Any other questions? Okay, Gary?
Pete, I know that the ARC had a 10-year agreement. What year are they into now?
year 2 of, I think it expires in '29.
So they've only got 8 years left to pay that off.
Correct.
And then my second question would be, pickleball is a convenient target these days, but some of these clubs, I think, need to revisit their dues. They're all fairly inexpensive, maybe 5, 10, 15. I think the largest I've heard is $25. If I was in a club and we had some sort of obligation like that, I'd think of a temporary increase even for 1 or 2 years to be able to try to catch up with that. Have we looked at what the dues are in these clubs and whether or not that's something that ought to be pursued by them?
That's a really broad question that I think Ann was alluding to, is that the whole funding source and the obligations, the encumbrance that they're putting on, that's exactly some of the concerns that are in that environment.
John?
No questions.
Lisa?
No questions.
Kathy?
Yes, I do. I'm still trying to get at somewhat, which was just alluded to, is it would be helpful for me to know what the project was for, I'll pick pickleball because it's at the top, what the project was, $600,000, that's just making up a story here, and that Sun City West itself paid $400,000 of it, and the pickleball club has agreed to pay $100,000 over how many years and when it's concluded. I would like to see that for each project, so I know what we've obligated to on our end, and then what the club's obligated to, because if the club defaults, I suspect somebody's still going to pay that bill because we've paid it up front. So I would like to see about maybe a 10-year pro forma. I'm not quite sure how long out these agreements are. And so that's what I'm really trying to get at. And it's really hard just to say, oh, this is good, without looking at the whole thing.
I initially had this presentation to be a little snapshot of each of those. I wouldn't call it in the interest of time, but a busy agenda, and not knowing the scope that you were looking for, we truncated it. But I'd be glad to share that with you individually or bring
think
it
the
to
whole
a
committee.
future one. So
Why don't we put that on our agenda for our next meeting, Pete?
I shall do.
Look at the entire thing.
And then if they've defaulted or if it's been adjusted, that should show on that sheet anyway. And then I like the idea of where the revenue's coming from. Is it dues? Is it fundraisers? Is it what? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, I believe we'll go ahead and start in on item 3.04, which is looking at our 100,000 and plus capital budget items for the 21-22 fiscal year. And we are going to look at these items individually. We will vote on them individually. I just want to tell you that for each one, I'll need a motion and a second, and then we will do a personal vote. These items will then be moved to the governing board for their review. So we are not the final say in these, but we do have a big part in this process. So Pete or Carl, I'm not sure who's doing this. Carl Wilhelm.
I'll carry the torch on this one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me today. And mind you, a few of these slides are from other departments, so I'll do my best to answer any of your questions. First up, we have golf maintenance, equipment, and vehicles, $1,633,839. This involves mowers, tractors, aerators, top dressers, green rollers, bunker rakes, fertigation systems at our well pump areas, utility vehicles and trailers, pickup trucks. Any questions?
Actually, I do have a question before you get too far, Carl. In your maintenance and equipment area, do you usually just carry each year like a, let's say 1.5 million, and then people come in and fill it in that way? Or is this every year you start from zero and build back up?
These, all these items on here, in this particular year, approximately 70 or so, 52 units, I'm sorry, but every one of these is established within the reserve study, every single one of them. And so the initial production of any item within the capital, not just the golf equipment, but every one of them gets brought forward and said, this is the year by the reserve study, but many of them we deem are not necessary for the replacement. They're still functioning and they're pushed out.
That's good, thanks.
I will comment that if you look at this slide that is up there right now that shows the breakdown of the equipment replacement, none of these items individually will be over $100,000. Is that correct, Carl?
That is correct.
This is just the aggregate of all the units that need to be replaced, and it includes the items that were mentioned in the earlier slide. All those things that are needed to maintain our beautiful golf courses.
And in the golf world, they have hundreds of pieces of equipment. Each year, the ones that have met their useful life in the study are evaluated and determined whether they can be prolonged. And you can see here in this slide, 52 units are scheduled of all of the assets that golf has. And these particular units, average age of replacement are 15.5 years, where our useful life determined for these vehicles is usually 10.
Okay, this is one line item, so we need, that was by itself, correct, Carl?
That's correct.
At 1.6 million. So I need a motion whether we are going to accept this in the budget or not.
I move to approve.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't
before
ask
the,
for discussion.
And I don't want to belabor the point. I promise I won't do this on every slide, but I have a question on this. Carl, is this rather typical for an annual expense, either quote last year, year before? How normal is this?
Yeah, that's probably more my world. As a comparison, last year, I think the aggregate was 1.1 million. It is elevated, but the future year spend is 1.1, 1.1. I think when you break it down on a per course, it starts to not seem so daunting. There are probably, I think in adjunct to what Carl was referencing, pretty much an average of 70 or so units on each course to see approximately 5 to 7 go out each year. That's actually, we really maintain and watchdog. It takes a pulling of teeth to get these guys to relinquish the equipment. And then they salvage units off of it, and I'm told that sometimes they'll keep some of the units for when they have hard scalping cuts into the mowers. They won't beat up the new ones, they'll kind of pull out the old guard.
Yeah. Thank you, Pete. I just wanted to help everybody get a kind of a perspective on it. It's a big one, and it shows up every year, so it's an educational question. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee or comments?
And Ann, I'll have to check, I don't want to throw a monkey in this, but there is a possibility of one of the fairway mowers being 100,000 plus, but if you want that, I can go check that while we're waiting. But in the past, I don't think we voted on it that way a year ago.
No, we're going to vote on this in the aggregate for
Okay,
the
thank
golf
you.
course maintenance equipment and vehicles.
So move.
Second.
Kathy moved and Gary seconded. Kathy, I'll just go person by person. Lisa?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Gary? Gary? And Lou? He's dropped off the call, okay. That is approved 5-0. Let's go on with the next item, please, Carl.
My apologies. Grandview Irrigation Turf Reduction Project, $865,000. Installation design, turf conversion design, 20 acres. Irrigation mainline road crossing installation, 9 total. Pump station installation, all required Maricopa County permitting. And this includes an allowance to submit documents on behalf of rec centers for the Arizona Water Protection Fund grant. Any questions?
Yes, Gary?
Carl, maybe it's not important, but it's the turf reduction part of that title kind of throws me because I know he's going to minimize the amount of turf that he's going to mess with at Grandview until the final state requirements are met. So is this a preparation for the turf reduction that ultimately is going to be done, maybe not until 2024 or 5?
General Manager?
Okay. That's good enough.
Yeah.
I just think people get, they see turf reduction, and then we know we're not going to do any of that until the state tells us what we need to do, and it kind of...
Yeah, that's right. The planning's going on now for that, so as we continue to change and where that plan continues to change from Arizona Department of Water Resources, right? We are anticipating that happening in 2025.
Yeah, I do. I think what would be helpful, Bill, would be, so this is in preparation of potential, and then on your chart down here, are these all in preparation of, or, okay, so it would be helpful to have, for me, from a budget and finance, what each cost would be in preparation of, and then potentially when, right now, what the due date is, you know, to implement, and I know that's going to be a shift, and then what that would cost at that particular time. That would be helpful to see. Thanks.
Other questions or comments from the committee?
And just easy not to pick it up, but Carl, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the biggest deals in here is the road crossing installations. And we're going to go through 9 different installations. Those things aren't cheap.
Right.
That is the bulk of the earliest portion of the scheduled portion of the project, correct? And overall, Todd has done his due diligence on cost estimating with the vendors involved, and notice that the schedule is over a long period of time, 2 years, so in its full perpetuity.
Carl, is the $865,000 then just what we will spend in 21, 22?
That is correct.
Okay, so there will be more added to this project in the next budget year, is that correct?
Yes, the main lines is the biggest chunk of that, roughly 700,000. Just don't hold me to these numbers. If Todd was here, he'd have them down to the penny. Another 50 or 100 grand for the design work and all the permits and everything. The actual production of that will be in the summer of next year. And then all that boring under the streets and everything to do the main lines. In conjunction with that, next year's budget cycle will have the irrigation systems presented. And at that time, the board will have to decide if they want to proceed with that, you know, multi-million-dollar component of it.
Well, let me ask you this. What we're doing now, what if we don't proceed with the turf reduction project, if we don't have to? Does this still need to be done?
Yes, the main lines, I wish Todd was here, but the main lines, I think, are in need of repair.
Well, I don't understand all this stuff, so I'm asking
Our
what-
apologies,
probably
but Todd
stupid questions.
Todd had to step away. Otherwise, he would have addressed this in its fullness.
okay.
Sorry about that.
The main lines on this particular golf course are over 40 years old.
Okay. so-
Normally, 20, 25-year rate, but we have, knock on wood, we're still here throwing water, which is a good thing. So that's kind of where we're at. So initially, replacing the main line has to happen eventually. And so on schedule, this is where we're at.
And I'm hearing that that's the bulk of the cost on this, about 700,000, Pete?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll get specifics, but yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, other questions or comments before we have a motion? None? Anyone? Harry has moved. Gary second. We'll go around vote. Harry? Gary, yes?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, 5-0, that one has passed. We'll go ahead to the Kuntz parking lots 1 and 2.
Now you can ask all the questions you want. I propose the Kuntz parking lots 1 and 2, north and south lots have asphalt and mill and resurfacing for $380,000. This removes 157,000 square foot of all of the remaining old asphalt that had nothing to do with the new master plan and the new parking lot. That parking lot is finished and will stay as is. This replaces all of the remaining parking lot areas, not including the walking track. And we replace that, we remove, we grade, we stabilize the soils, and install 3 inches of brand-new asphalt. Any questions?
I have one. When we looked earlier at the pickleball expansion, one of the options was to do something at Kuntz. And I know that that's now part of the master plan, and that's put off for probably a couple of years. But are we going to do something now that we might later have to just tear out for pickleball?
No, any proposed ideas at Kuntz for the tennis facility, any adjustments, change in gameplay, these parking lots or the new one has no issue other than traffic and access.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
Yep.
Other questions?
Yeah, Carl, is it, as you look at the picture here on the left-handed side, and then that looks like newer asphalt, you're not touching that, correct?
Nope, this is your new 60-car parking lot, and it will
Great.
stay as
Okay.
is.
And then this kind of relates to planning. I know there's been a little bit of an upheaval on R.H. Johnson being Palm Ridge being closed because of the parking lot for another month after we just opened again. Will this cause a closure of Kuntz?
Absolutely. The prospected plan right now is we would complete our current FY 2021 budgeted items, other than maybe some project overruns where we go into the next year. But we will complete Palm Ridge first. If this gets approved in the budget, I would schedule the project that goes right before this, we'll discuss in a moment, is the lighting project. I would anticipate that would be in July, August, and then we would schedule this for September and be completed by October. If we don't get favorable discussion in that, then I would schedule this for May of '22. So
So you said the facility would close for the parking lot?
absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so I'm having a hard time
No problem.
working with understanding why we can't still use that one lot, keep access open, and construction-wise, put up the appropriate safety walks. I'm very familiar with this.
It can be. Mobilizations are always an option. But to be fiscally prudent, I get a greater cost savings if I close for the 3 or 4 weeks, as opposed to having the leased equipment from these asphalt vendors. They are the professionals that take out and replace asphalt, but they do not invest in this large equipment. They actually lease that out in the industry, And to have Stardust and R.H. Johnson Boulevards, there is no public parking there. So where would people park? Over at the foundations and subdivisions where they're gonna walk a half a mile to the Kuntz area? So I can schedule this to have one parking lot half done at one time and have another done immediately after, but that is a multiple mobilization effort, and we would pay an increased cost.
All right.
And that's really a discussion, you know, amongst
Well,
staff and.
I don't deny the need at all. I think there's better ways to manage this, and it may be that they have to work 2 8-hour shifts in a row or whatever. I come from the Midwest, so I don't know what the shift times are here in terms of the day, and if it costs an extra $20,000. But again, in the summer, the full-time residents here are getting just killed when you want to really be inside and not being able to access those facilities for me here.
I understand, but we do offer you 3 other rec centers with multiple pools and multiple workout facilities at the same exact time. So it's not like we're not our members' other alternate places to go. It's their favorite place that's shut down for a temporary time period. And it's hard. It's hard to manage for the benefit of everyone. I'm sorry.
Carl?
Well, it's not the pool issue. I mean, there's not just pool
understand.
people there.
It is open for discussion, though, to schedule the
I
mobilizations.
I would be curious to know if you could accelerate this and get it done in, let's say, 2 weeks, and what that additional cost might be on 2 shifts. I mean, it's kind of like the insurance. It might be worth just that little bit more to get it done, but obviously you know how I feel about this.
I understand. Thank you for bringing that up.
Lisa?
I was just curious on, and I think I asked Bill, so he answered the question for me quietly, but what the cost would have been in answer to Kathy's question to bring in that heavy equipment, because I too was curious on dividing it up, maybe by parking, half the parking lot. But I understand it's not like 20,000 versus 100,000. So is that what we're talking about?
We are, yes, and I can certainly get that in our bids. We are not out to bid. This is, these pricings are based on the standard industry, $2 approximately per square foot. We go out to bid, we have a contingency fit in there for soil stabilization, and I can get those costs.
Okay.
May I join?
I'm good.
May I join the
Carl, thank
discussion?
you.
Sure. You're next.
I'm with Kathy as far as her line of thinking on this. There are some other clubs. The knitting club would be one that comes to mind.
Isn't the wood over there, and quilting and?
Quilting
Folks,
and
I can-
macro knit. And if we could find an alternative for them, perhaps that's a solution as well. But I think in terms of trying to make it a fact-based decision, I think, Carl, your logic is good, and I understand you're acting in a very responsible and prudent way. But I think it would be useful for the community if we could see what the alternatives are. The greater the upcharge, if you will, the more the more pain that's inflicted on the dollar side of the equation as opposed to the use of the facility. So I would highly encourage us to have, if there are alternatives, that we at least put them forth in a public way for review. Thanks.
And I will say that for your review, you won't have a committee during those timeframes. So the committees don't meet during the summer. I've heard your request. I will definitely take that into consideration when we discuss it with staff, and let's hope for a positive result here. So if the cost justifies the correct and shortened timing, I will certainly take that approach. I really do appreciate your input on that.
Thank you. Gary? Harry? Okay. Are we ready to have a vote on this? So I'll need some kind of a motion. Gary moved.
I'd like a clarification of what that motion is and whether it or not it includes alternatives.
Gary?
I'd say it's presented just the way Carl has asked, $380,000, because he hasn't sent it out for bids yet. So we have to approve it before you send it out, correct?
Yes, and respectfully, folks, this is the Budget and Finance Committee, not the Properties Committee, not chartered clubs.
This is the Budget and Finance Committee.
Yes, ma'am. So we're talking about dollars today. And
That's
you're-
why we're at Budget and Finance.
And I will remind you that all the recommendations from properties and charter clubs has seen this too, correct? And charter clubs and budget and finance will all go to the governing board before a final vote. So this is our chance to make our opinion known. So Gary, you're,
So I move that we accept the proposal to asphalt, mill, and resurface the Coons parking lot for $380,000.
is there a second?
I second.
Lisa, second. Vote. Kathy?
Just a clarification, if you have different options, Carl, and it exceeds the 380, does it come back to budget?
If it were to exceed 380, the general manager has up to 49,999 signing authority, and anything past that has to go as a facts and findings to the governing board. Based on what I had shared with you, though, the industry standard is $2 per square foot on setting a budget for asphalt replacement. Our vendors historically have come in much less than that. So not only to establish the winning bid, the low bid, I believe there's enough funds in here to also give you an option for the mobilizations, the speeding up the timeline, the maybe working a double shift. So I will do my due diligence in
approve.
that.
Lisa? Lisa?
Yes, please.
John?
No.
Gary?
Yes?
Harry? Okay, by motion of 4-1, this will go to the governing board. And thank you all for your input. I think it was very valuable, and I really appreciate the thought that my committee members put into these decisions. And I also appreciate very much Carl and his depth of knowledge. Okay, the next item, Beardsley Greenhouse.
Beardsley Greenhouse, replacement and expansion, $300,000. This is to remove the original 380 square foot structure, provide architectural plans and engineering, and build an expanded 960 square foot greenhouse. This project came about as an item that is in our asset replacement tool. It has met its useful life. We informed the garden club of this, and at that time, they conveniently asked if we would consider expanding it. So this request is to go from 380 square foot to the 960 square foot greenhouse.
Our committee saw a wonderful presentation by Carl at our meeting in January. And if you'll recall, this does include the Garden Club was offering to put $30,000 into this, and they wanted a loan for $120,000. And I can tell you that I don't know about the money that they are offering. I personally, as a board member, will not be voting for a loan on this because I think that's going to be contrary to what we should be doing. But Carl, what I'd like to ask you is if they replaced it just at the 380 square foot, what would that cost be?
We've established that value at approximately $150,000. I believe the multiple conversations with greenhouse manufacturers, all their pricing is relatively the same. The differences are just the benefits of their product. The lowest one, though, happens to be the same greenhouse company that provided a brand-new one for Sun City. I believe today I have a proposal from them for about $110,000. This doesn't really consider necessarily steel increase in costs and that, but I believe after greenhouse, then there would be the remaining funds would be for the general contracting related items.
Okay, but this is still in the budget at $300,000. That is what we are voting on today. So all the other items aside, let's ask our questions based on that. So Harry?
So if we vote on this today, it's 300,000, and we take out of consideration anything from the clubs. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm in favor of it because what Carl just said, if you replaced it at 380, it's 150. You're going to get 1.5 times more for the other 150. And probably the useful life of this will be what, 25, 30 years?
It will be set at 25 years.
So to me, it makes sense to expand it and do something good for the community.
Comment and a question. The January call that we were on was the first one that I participated in. My recollection was, because I remember the example I gave you was the 150,000 that would cost to replace. It was to go to $200,000 at the time in that conversation to get what they wanted. I'm just curious how the 300,000 came in, because my other example was the Johnson Pool, where it was $2.5 million to fix it, and we spent $4 million and got a fabulous piece of property. Has it always been 300,000?
It
Sir,
has.
Okay,
I
all right,
don't
then
recall.
I'm mistaken. Bill, is this issue of clubs paying, getting loans and all that, I know you're studying that and trying to come up with a policy. If we approve this, it has to be based on the understanding that there's not going to be any loan given, correct? Okay, thank you.
No questions.
The only question that I have, Carl, there's nothing in between a 380 square foot structure versus 960?
Oh, absolutely. The club could have requested any size, and I would have compensated for that request and delivered that to you. They felt that based on their growth and needs, that the 960 was.
Made the most sense?
Yes, that's correct.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you. I'm good.
Kathy?
No questions.
Okay, are we ready for a motion? So move. What would you say what you're moving?
Excuse me.
That's a motion by Gary and a second by Harry. Okay? Start with you, Harry. How you, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Kathy? Okay, that passes 5-0. Go on to the next item, which is the shoreline project number 14 on hole number 14, I guess it is, at Trail Ridge.
Shoreline project number 14, Trail Ridge, $296,125. Reclaim the original shoreline, install 400 linear feet of split face block wall, install 300 tons of riprap on the desert side of both lakes, backfill and returf. The course scheduled to close Monday, July 5th, 2021. Course reopens Tuesday, October 19th.
Okay, let's have discussion. I will note at this time that Kathy has had to leave the meeting. We currently have 5 members, which is still a quorum. So, any questions, Lisa?
No.
John? No. Gary?
Not a question, just a comment for those of you that may not golf or understand what this hole's all about, but it's going to be a fabulous improvement and an upgrade. And I can't believe Todd can do this for 296, but if he says he can, I know he will.
And are you expecting a hole-in-one there?
If I got a hole in one on this course, Bill, I'd be in Golfer Digest for a year. It's a 380-yard hole. But you can't hit the green and keep the ball on the green because it just rolls all over.
Carl, do you have anything to add to that?
I do not.
Okay, let's see, we've already had comments. Do we have a motion on this one?
Todd was at our men's club meeting last Tuesday, and it was suggested, and he agreed, I'm not sure if you want to incorporate I'm sure he can incorporate this in the project at no additional expense, but was to create an alternate entrance to the fairway. Because that area just short of the lake gets beaten up so badly that if you imagine coming off the tee, instead of driving the cart around, you would drive the cart right down through the middle of the fairway and you'd access there, so you'd only have people exiting, not entering and exiting. But I think you'll probably include that in there.
I'll allow the general manager to share that with Todd then.
Harry, did you have any comments on this project?
Well, I think it's a good project. The one thing, and I just don't know how they do it, is they could figure out a way to get a trail out at that end by the green. They'd probably speed up play 15 minutes.
Okay, I think we're ready for a question. Okay, I'm at the last one, never mind, okay. Do we have a motion?
I move that the shoreline project of number 14 at Trail Ridge be approved for $296,125.
Okay. Motion by Gary, second by Harry. We'll go around and vote. Lisa?
Yes, please.
John?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
Harry? Okay, motion approved 4-0.
I would like to say that making that request to Todd, we will do, but just, I'm going to send all the folks in the Audubon Society your way. That's okay? I can say no.
Okay. Moving right ahead, Carl, the Beardsley Aquatics Lobby enclosure.
Thank you. Beardsley Aquatics Lobby enclosure for $160,000. Provide architectural plans and permitting, general contractor to enclose open areas and finish the interior space, creating an interior conditioned lobby like R.H. Johnson Swim and Fitness Center. Any questions?
Lisa?
No, I'd just like to say I'm glad to see this back in. I appreciate it.
Beardsley has kind of been the redheaded stepchild for a while. Harry, any comments? No questions? Gary? John?
No questions.
I think we're getting giddy with these things. Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the Beardsley Aquatics enclosure for $160,000.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Lisa, motion, John, second. Let's go around the room. Lisa?
Yes, please.
John? Yes. Gary? Yes. Harry? Yes. Motion carries 4-0. The next one is the R.H. Johnson Environmental Services Maintenance Office for $150,000. Carl?
Yes, the R.H. Johnson Environmental Services Maintenance Office, $150,000. Design and build a new 560-square-foot office addition off the east end of the social hall loading dock area. This replaces the 480-square-foot makeshift structure that you see in the photo there. Office is unrepairable, leaks, has rodent issues, and this corrects the unfit conditions and provides the supervisors two-desk office area as they have inside the makeshift one now. A staff break room. Employees are currently just meeting outside underneath the tree on picnic benches, and employee lockers.
Any questions? Harry?
Carl, if you build something nice like this, will he stay there all the time instead of being out working?
So this actually solves the supervisorial position for Edward Mendez and his staff that maintains all of the landscaping for our 4 rec centers and other chores. This is separate from golf. Edward and his team meets right out here on the loading docks of the social hall. You saw what they meet in currently, and deservedly so. You can't have operations in a building like that any longer. So the loading dock is going to be fully maintainable and usable by trucks and services needed for the social hall. So thank you for considering this one.
Anything else, Harry? Gary?
Can't get it done fast enough.
John?
No questions.
Lisa?
No questions.
Okay, we have a motion.
I make a motion to approve the R.H. Johnson Environmental Services Maintenance Office for $150,000.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
John's taking the minutes. He'll write somebody down. Lisa, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
John?
Yes.
Gary? Harry? Motion carries 4-0. Next item is the Koontz Parking and Walkway Lighting Replacement for $150,000.
Thank you. This is concurrent to the Koontz parking lot mill and replacement. If approved, I would install the replacement lighting, just like we're doing at Palm Ridge. The parking lot at Palm Ridge is currently done and completed. We'll be working on the second phase, starting now with the walkway lighting. And this project here proposed is identical. So the same replacement lighting that you're experienced here at R.H. Johnson, finished at Beardsley, now is complete at Palm Ridge. And this is our final rec center that needs parking lot lighting replacement to the new efficient LED lighting.
Lisa, any questions?
Nope.
Harry? Gary?
Yes. Carl, do you have any history of the actual LED savings from the other ones that you've done to be able to project this?
I can only give that to you by wattage if I took the time to collect that. I collected it approximately 4 years ago when I got here on the conversation about R.H. Johnson. And the reason being is the same question was posed, but R.H. Johnson was unique. We actually, even though we put the LED efficient lighting in, we added the amount of lighting. So it was either a break-even point or a slight increase in that case. Everywhere else, though, per wattage, we've cut our electric by half. So to break it down for that specific thing, I can't draw it out of a utility bill, though.
Great answer.
John, questions?
No questions.
I will call for a motion.
I move to approve the Koontz Parking and Walkway Lighting Replacement for $150,000.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
And we'll call for the question. Harry?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that motion approved 4-0. Next one is Beardsley Pool Area Lighting improvement for $120,000.
This is new indirect lighting, wall-mounted fixtures. Musco Lighting has, I have invited them to come and give us a discussion on this months ago when we were establishing this budget. Musco has shown us the lighting that they propose to do for this project. They are the industry-leading company in photometrics. We don't have a lot of other resources here in our areas for this, unless you went to just respectfully your everyday electrician and asked for manufacturers to provide the electrician information. But based on some of that research, Musco has provided us virtually same for same pricing and alternatives. The key thing about Musco is they are going to actually provide us the lighting, some amount of that lighting in advance so that we can see what the photometric spread on this before we actually make the investment. So again, I propose the $120,000 project for the improvement of the lighting. And before we venture into any agreement with them, we will get to see what the lighting looks like first.
Thank you. Questions? Lisa?
No.
John?
I have one question. When the preliminary lighting is available for viewing, who makes the decision that it's acceptable or not?
Respectfully, I would say staff, based on the, you know, if we're describing what our hopes are, the difference between the photo that exists as the pool does today and what we're hoping to achieve on the right-hand side, I think we're going to see a major difference.
That's exactly where I was headed, Carl. The lighting in that building desperately needs to be improved to bring it up to the 21st century. And I just want to make sure that if we do this, we either do it right or don't do it.
Yeah, and normally I would involve Properties Committee, but it'll most likely be a summer project, and, you know, again, committees aren't available during the summer generally.
Okay. Anything else, John?
Yeah, I would just encourage for everybody's well-being that that be noted and in the light of day, that it's been looked at and approved. But I don't want any redo on things that we have the ability to do right, that's all.
Would 50% of the good picture still be adequate?
I think it's going to be hard not to have an improvement, but
Improvement, yes, but an improvement up to our Sun City West standards is what I'm
Absolutely.
pushing for.
absolutely. Gary?
Nothing.
Harry? Okay, do I have a call for a motion?
I make the motion that we approve the Beardsley Lighting project for $120,000 as written and discussed.
Gary, second. Lisa?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Gary? Harry? Thank you. That motion approved 4-0.
Side comment, John, I think what we can do is work if Musco comes in and does put that sample lighting up, we can do foot candle readings. And so we know what we have now, which is dim. And we can see with the new lighting what that foot candle scenario is, and then we can easily go to other pools, whether they're in Tempe, Peoria, Surprise, and look at what their indoor pools are foot candle wise and do a comparable, so.
Bill, I really like that idea.
Certainly, yeah.
The more fact-based we can make our decision-making, the better the decision-making becomes.
That's easy, thanks.
Next, we're going to look at the HVAC units at our recreation centers. I will make a note that this is for 9 units. They could have been presented separately, as we did with some of the golf course items, and they would have each been well under the 100,000. As an aggregate, they're 102,487. So, Carl?
Just remember that the last time these units were installed or replaced was in between 2002 and 2004. So facilities maintenance does a phenomenal job in maintaining our units and getting the maximum life out of them. 3 at Pebblebrook, 5 at Beardsley, and 1 at R.H. Johnson.
Let's go around for questions or comments. Harry? Gary? John?
No questions.
Lisa?
No questions.
Have a call for a motion?
I move we approve the Recreation Center HVAC units replacement plan for $102,487.
Do I have a second? Thank you, Harry. Harry, will vote? Gary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
That motion carried 4-0. Next will be our golf ops, 20 golf carts. Again, if these items were listed separately, they would not be on the 100,000 items. So, Carl?
So in bulk, Golf Ops proposes 20 golf cart replacement for $101,846. The current inventory average age is 10 years. And then this reduces Golf Ops reduction, repairs, and downtime.
I think you'll recall we saw one of the bright spots in our budget was the ancillary revenue, which does include the golf cart rental. So we want to keep these in working order. So, Lisa, you have any comments, questions?
No.
John?
No.
Gary? Harry? Call for a motion?
Motion, we approve the golf carts for $101,846.
Thank you, Lisa. Second? Gary, second. Lisa, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
Harry? Gary? John?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Quick comment?
Yes.
It was brought to our attention by a director to give a presentation. O'Hara's not here today, or he should be, but he and I are meeting on this subject, but we'll be doing a presentation in front of the governing board, on Thursday, just to do a little bit of comparable. Right now, our fleet's gas carts. We're asked to look into electric carts. So I don't know if any of you all have personal golf carts or whatnot, but anybody have electric at home? Anybody prefer electric? No way, no way, no way. That's coming from the budget committee. That's Okay, that's good. There are issues, and anyway, we are giving a little bit of a presentation relative to that subject on Thursday, so just a heads up there.
The major disadvantage is you can't turn the carts, because you can't recycle. I mean, you might get a half round out the second time around, but with gas, you just clean them up and send them out again.
Thank you.
Next item is a new capital request for Beardsley Pool and Spa for some wall and decor improvement, $100,000. And I'll let Carl give a little history and information about this.
In the big picture of Beardsley, yes, Beardsley is definitely deserving of a facelift in areas. I know we can't accomplish everything, but Properties Committee definitely had this on their radar. Their committee thoroughly walked Beardsley, thoroughly made comments. I would say a majority of their recommendations have already been addressed by facilities maintenance. Russ and Byron's team have done a lot of painting and a lot of corrections, improvements. These are the areas that fall into capital, along with the lighting, improvements to the pool, along with the enclosure to the lobby. As we continue our purview walking into that building, Properties has asked that the wall colors and decor and wainscoting get addressed and get beautified. So this is $100,000 to continue our efforts in figuring out what the best products for that humid pool environment are. This has not been solved to date on, is paint the option for the wainscoting? We know we can obviously paint the walls, so we're doing a little research here. The COVID has made it a little more difficult to find some of the available resources to make the perfect decision. So I believe that I have this scheduled for in the cycle of the spring of '22. That'll give me plenty of time to, even get Properties Committee back on board. I know that we have a colorization subcommittee going on, so their input has been requested. But I believe the results will be favorable to this budget. And this then lines us up also for the end of pool carpet replacement, which requires the carpeting to be replaced with something. I'll be putting down proposing a rubber flooring, the same that we did at the Coons outdoor pool, and removing the fountain features that you see in the ground and on the wall, and get this back to a nice flat, smooth concrete, neutral environment for multi-purpose use.
Thank you, Carl. Harry, you have any questions, comments? Gary?
No questions.
Lisa?
No questions.
Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the Beardsley Pool and Spa area wall decor improvement project for $100,000.
Harry, second. We'll vote. Harry? Yes. Gary? Yes. John?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. Thank you all so much, and I want to say a big thank you to Carl for all the effort it takes for him to do this.
And I'd just like to throw in full disclosure, we have one other over $100,000 line item that is not in this slide presentation. Pete and I just forgot the allowances categories of our budget. We have one line item, safety and structural integrity, and that is for $100,000. So I just want to open that up for any questions, because that's technically a $100,000 line item approval for your committee.
Is that what you had, Pete? Okay. So, as I understand it, this is an allowance that is put into the budget for safety and structural for things that may arise during any of the projects.
Correct, and we have 5 or 6 annual allowances. We have changing demographics. We have ADA requirements, safety and structural. Sometimes a specific department like IT has an allowance placed. I would say the history has been, probably 50% or less of those allowances actually get used, some not at all. This year I did not have any ADA requirements necessary. But again, full disclosure, we had, in safety and structural integrity this year, we had a $100,000 allowance and we used 110. And primarily $30,000 of that was due to the ongoing project at Palm Ridge for the repairs to the foundation of the pool building. Just to
Okay.
kind of put it in context.
Thank you. So, do we have any questions? Harry? Gary? John?
No.
Lisa?
No.
Do I have a motion? So move to approve safety and structure for $100,000.
yes.
Okay, thank you. Second? Gary? Okay, we'll vote. Lisa?
Yes, please.
Yes.
John? Yes. Okay, motion carries 4-0. And thank you so much, Carl. I know you are a very, very, very busy man in this community, and to take a couple of hours this morning and enlighten us, I really appreciate it. The next item we're going to go to is item 3.02, which is an update on capital and reserves by Pete Finelli. Thank you.
So many of you have seen this update. So our budget amount was 5.9 million. We've issued purchase orders of just under 5.2 million. 4.8 or so of that is on current year budgets. The 370 against encumbered items from the prior year. We closed out, meaning the purchase order issued, the equipment or the project done, and then payment made to the vendor, and only at that time do we close that out. At this time, that represents 2.8 million of the 4.0 million that we've purchase ordered, and on that we've recorded 321,000 of savings. So a good positive environment at this time. Several items that have not been rendered yet. This list was pretty sizable when we first started communicating this at the end of the year. Now we're down to one material item, and then a bevy of, I just picked a threshold of 30,000 or less, and quite a few of those are being worked on as we speak, but nothing actually out the door. Here's what we were talking about a few minutes ago on the allowances. In the current year, 435. As Carl referenced, safety and structural has had the most activity. Not so much in boilers or IT or ADA, changing demographics or well pumps, with one effort on the energy conservation that, and the only reason that was a little bit higher than budget was we were able to knock out an entire building versus splitting it up, and it just had efficiencies on the project cost. So overall, just a little bit over half used, maybe 60%, and 189,000 as we enter the last quarter. We always go in with the presumption that nothing more is needed, so hopefully that will retain itself and deliver savings by the end of the year. Real brief update on the reserves. We've demonstrated this before, but the highlighted column sadly is the budget. I use this slide quite a bit in that budget form. So if you'll cast your eye one column to the left, you'll see the beginning balance of 27 when we entered the year. Our operating income right now has the 688,000 gap. Hopefully, as John was alluding to, no trip ups as we go down the last stretch. I'm not anticipating giving up that. On a negative side, the investment in earnings and unrealized has a 2.4 million projection. That was done at the end of November and early December, and since then we have experienced some bond valuation changes in our reserves, so I suspect that we may come up short on that. So those two will probably offset each other. And the APFs are running well. That 1389 is probably going to be right where we land, so I don't anticipate excess, but I don't see where we'll be short either. And on the capital spend, 5.9 million, we've got essentially two major buffers against that. The 5.9 million includes, let's just say that 300 or 1,000 savings, as well as the allowance savings of 189. So I believe we should be in a good position to have at least the 27,680 in reserve funds at the end of the year, if not more. And we won't be encumbering over anything close to the 2.5 million right in the middle. Last year, we had only 20% of the Coots project paid for, and other material, several other material carryovers. So, any questions on capital or the reserves?
Anyone? Questions? Comments? Thank you, Pete. We're going to go on now then to item 3.03, which is a recommendation. It's an attorney revised policy FI 17. And who's going to speak to this, Deb or Pete? We have Deb Long from our accounting department, who is a specialist on this.
Hello, everybody. On February 20th, 2020, several changes were made to the policy FI 17, which deals with the asset preservation fees. You'll hear me say APFs instead of asset preservation fees. Since that time, there are a few issues that we've come across that we believe need to be addressed through policy revision. The red line version you have in front of you was drafted by our attorney to address our concerns. So the 3.1.1. If there is not a complete change of owner or owners in the transfer, the fee must still be paid in any transferring owners together or separately, retaining less than a 50% interest in the property after the transfer. Best described for the example, a transfer of the property from one owner to add a spouse with joint or equal ownership would not result in a fee, but a transfer from one person to add 2 more people to the deed would result in a fee. Exemptions are the 3.7 exemptions below. So generally speaking, we believe the board didn't intend to have an APF administered when a property isn't changing hands, but simply adding a person to title. Most notably, this occurs when an owner member is widowed and then remarries, or in other situations when an individual adds a spouse when they originally owned the property by themselves. And finally, some members might add another family member to the title, such as a child. To address these situations, the attorney revised the language to state that if a person is only adding one person to the deed, 50% change, no APF shall be pursued. Other situations are addressed by the language within the revision. Does anybody have any questions on that portion?
About how many of those have we encountered in the last year, would you say? Do you have any idea?
Quite a few of them. There are a lot of people that purchase a home that are married just for easiness. If they're from another state, will buy it individually, and then later, once they've sold their houses from another state, will add their spouse to title. So it's really still the same people owning the property, it's just putting them into title legally. So it's kind of a fairness issue. I mean, it's still the same people, they just aren't on title to the property.
Sure.
So,
Any other questions? George?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quick comment. I want to make sure everybody is understanding. This is written by our attorney, not by us, for the association and this. It's not our thought. The attorney has put this completely out here. This is his wording. Is that correct?
yes.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure we got that.
Anyone in the committee? John?
I have several questions.
Sure.
I'm sorry to have to belabor this discussion, but first of all, for clarity and to make sure everybody understands this the same way, if two people buy a home, they both pay the APF fee as it is today? Are there 2 APF fees collected?
No. One APF when you purchase a home or when you are a new owner.
Okay, good. So now, let me ask, in terms of how you have to administer this, because the way I read it, I had some flashing signs. If partner A and partner B own a home, and they've paid their rec fee, or their APF fee, and partner 2B dies, the way I read this, they would, partner A would be able to add a partner C, a replacement.
For that
Person.
existing,
For that.
property, that's correct.
Okay. Would that same apply if they, partner A added a 55-year-old child?
Yes,
And if so, then partner A dies. Is partner C in the community for free?
they've been paying all along. They paid for the transfer fee when they were added to title and owner dues all along. So yes, in these circumstances, we are missing out on an APF for an inheritance down the road. But in the meantime, we are collecting the $500 a year for the owner dues.
Understand the $500, but that, to me, conflicts with our inheritance policy. And I'm really not comfortable at this point that I've heard enough to say that that's consistent, that we're applying the APF fee consistently
Right.
in both cases.
So if you've got an inheritance type of situation, so say you've got 4 children, you're not going to add 4 children to your title and pay $2,000 a year for owner dues. So,
No, in my original example, you could put one person on there, and then down the road, that person could replace partner A.
yes. Yep.
To me, it's a loophole, and I'm not comfortable.
Right, it is a loophole,
with
but we
that.
can't cover every situation. That's, that is one of the loopholes that there is. But for even looking at a deed, when I get the deed changes on a daily basis, I have no idea of who that person is that's being added. I can try to guess by the name, but otherwise, I don't know if it's a spouse, significant other, or a child, so.
We do state in 3.8.1 that if the resulting owner of a legal or beneficial interest is already an owner, that then the APF will not apply. That is already in our
Right,
policy.
that's correct.
You have more comments, John?
No, I'm just not there.
Okay.
On it. I think it needs, I don't know how to button it down off the top of my head. I can't make a suggestion here, but I'm uncomfortable that it's going to be very hard to be consistent, and I value consistency in the way we treat our owner members.
Well, I think the 3.8.1, though, is already there for the, oh, I see what you're saying, though, going back to when they're added on. Okay. I'm following you now. Lisa, you have any comments at this point?
No, I don't think so. I'm still mulling over John's thing, but where I'm going is if they add the child and then say hypothetically we collect 8-10 years of $500, then haven't we collected hypothetically enough to equate to an asset, an APF fee?
In my mind, no, Lisa. I don't mean to be argumentative about it. It's just that annual rec fee is, in my mind, for covering the operating expenses associated with the rec fee, with the usage of the facility. So I have them in separate buckets in my mind, and I just see, I see a hole big enough to drive a truck through, that's all. I'm sorry.
Deb, you want to go ahead with the changes under 3.4?
Sure. So 3.4, purchase of a replacement, we're now adding owner-occupied residential unit. Virtually every section under 3.4, the attorney has added the words owner-occupied and references primary number of the owner member's cards associated with the property. Adding owner-occupied covers people who own more than one property and are requesting a refund while moving within the walls of Sun City West. We believe the board intends to allow for people who live in a home to be able to purchase a different home within Sun City West to live in. Currently, our computer system associates the owner-occupied home with their primary number, while all other properties owned, rental properties, investment properties, et cetera, have a -01-02. Thus, a refund request would only be granted when the property was sold, was the primary number.
Has that been an issue?
Yes,
It has, okay.
a very big one.
A very big issue?
Yes.
Okay. So this is closing up a loophole.
Right, before we changed the policy a year ago, we had owner-occupied primary residence was part of the refund. That wording was taken out. So it has really opened that up where we've got people that are owning more than one property. If they don't follow suit for, say, the 1 year, and they've owned 4 properties, they go ahead and they sell another one and come and say, well, now it's been 1 year since I've owned that property. So they are finding loopholes in that, and the primary owner occupied really does need to be put back in there because that is what it was meant to be, for you to live within the walls. If you want to move, that's fine, but that is your home. It's not meant for investments and rentals and that type of thing.
Do we have any questions or comments? Lisa, I'll start with you.
No, I don't have any questions.
Harry? Gary? John?
No questions on this one.
Does that covers everything?
That covers
on-
everything, yes.
On FI 17?
Yep.
Okay, our charge is to accept or not accept this, and it will be sent on to the governing board at their May workshop for approval. So, discussion, anybody have any comments they want to make? Motion of any kind? Mm-hmm.
And that's okay to set up a trust. And you can change the ownerships in the trust. And that's not going to be an issue the way this document is written, as I see. Am I correct?
So, right now you see a lot of refinancing being done, and people are taking properties from individuals into a trust. So on the deed itself, it states, okay, so if you've got John and Mary Smith as individuals, and then you've got the Smith Family Trust, lower on the deed, it states that the trustees and the beneficiaries of this trust are John and Mary Smith. So you've got the same ownership, individuals trust. When you get down to the 3.8 portion of it, where it indicates when the last living person of that trust passes away, then the ownership transfers to who the trustee is or whoever was appointed co-trustee.
Or a beneficiary.
Or beneficiaries, yes. Sometimes,
And the fees would apply to that.
most certainly, yes.
So, then back to what John says, you can't play the games with the trust because it's still gonna catch it at the end, but they can if they figure out how to transfer the ownership.
Correct. There's a lot of people used to put children on title to the property for just in case they pass away. More and more people are learning that that's not the correct thing to do because they're getting letters stating, okay, now you've added children to title, now you owe the owner member dues. They'll call and ask the question. The correct thing to do is do a beneficiary deed, and then when they pass away, then they are the new owners. And that majority of the people do that. I would say out of the 200 and some deeds that come across my desk that they've added children is probably less than 5. So it's not a huge deal, but again, it's a loophole. but we're trying to close them as we come across them.
But then do those children have to pay the APF?
No. If you're a single owner and you added 2 children, you would have to, under the new scenario. But if you add just 1, but again, how do you decipher on a deed who that person is?
So our struggle, John, and you and Lisa were on the subcommittee. If you read it right now, and we've posed this question, I'm just being blunt, if you read it right now, any change to the title triggers an APF. And at this juncture, we're applying the fairness component, which is to say, if somebody has widowed, found another spouse, and they're doing an addition, being blunt, we're not pursuing that because it's the fairness. And so this attempt was to memorialize into policy what we're currently applying. If we knew there was a child being added, and if we could structure some kind of language which made us understand that the inheritance, and it doesn't have to be a child, but many of them usually are, if we could structure that, the primary people that owned the property when they paid the APF somehow descended down at that, now that person acquiring wasn't just added to the deed, but maybe something like that, where if there's a name change of the benefactors from the original 1 or 2 people that paid, that would trigger the APF versus just our deed change. It's either too broad or it's too narrow. And that's a challenge we have. But in the
A
context...
divorce would be another case besides just death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It gets complicated,
Correct,
Pete.
yeah.
I have no question about that.
What I would maybe suggest, with your approval, is to maybe break this up into 2 separate motions. That multiple property one seems to garner a consensus approval. I think it's easy to apply and easy to understand, and perhaps we need to reconvene Lisa and yourself in that dormant subcommittee, and we'll get your buy-in on that.
So in other words, break it up into the 3.1.1 and then
Yes.
break it up into the items under 3.4.
I would prefer that, yeah.
Okay. I'd like to get some input from the committee before we move forward with any motions. Lisa, does that make sense to you? Do you have comments about that?
No, I'm okay. I'm on board with Pete's suggestion.
John?
I really like Pete's suggestion. I think it's very open-minded and consistent with what the community should be doing.
Okay, Gary?
I really like his suggestion because it doesn't include Harry and I. One less meeting
Oh,
to
your
go to.
time's coming.
Gary, we're happy to broaden the subcommittee.
Okay, then I need a motion to this that will include what we've all just said. Lisa? Are you going to make the motion?
Yeah, I think I can try to make the motion if I can get it right. Let's see, I'll make the motion to move forward with Pete's suggestion to break this up into 2. One, to move forward with moving part of this.
Which,
The
can we
FI.
define those 3.4?
So we can define 3.4 and move forward the remaining FI to the governing board? Is that correct?
Move forward the items 3.4.
3.4?
Under 3.4.
And the rest of it, we have to move on. I thought I had it backwards.
The items under 3.1 are
Oh, 3.1 has to be.
under further review.
Oh, I had it backwards. I apologize.
I think we could just simplify it by just saying, make the motion to move forward 3.4.
Oh, there you
items.
go. Okay. There you go. See, John, you
Okay.
should have just made the motion yourself.
He's taking the
I've
notes.
talked too
He's
much already.
He's already writing the notes.
Yeah, I know. So,
And do I have a second? Thank you, Harry. And we'll do a vote. Lisa?
yes.
John?
Yes.
Gary? Harry? And I haven't said so earlier, but I am indebted to John for agreeing to take the minutes today for us. I appreciate that very much.
I am.
You may want to wait until you read them.
No, I'm thanking you now. I'm confident in the product I will get. Okay, we have 2 items left, and I wanted to mention that the item 3.07, Chartered Clubs Tax Status Subcommittee, has been eliminated from this agenda. This will not be a subcommittee, it will be a special committee of the board. Special committees report to the board, subcommittees report back to the committee that they are under, and then to the board. So we're going to a special committee, so that's why this item has been removed. So the last item. That committee will be established then, yes. Thank you. And so what we have left is 3.05, which is the metal shop capital variance. And I don't know who's speaking to this. Is it Pete, Carl, or Bill?
Yes.
Yes, good. I got the 3 musketeers.
I'll start.
Thank you, Carl.
Okay, memo to the Rec Center Sun City West Governing Board being presented first at the BNF committee today. The subject is the Metal Shop Addition, additional fund request. Our issue is the Metal Shop Addition project has been approved within the FY 2021 budget in the amount of $570,000. After advertising and receiving qualified bids on April 12, 21, it was determined that the project requires the authorization of additional capital improvement funding over the allowable amount authorized by the general manager. A little background, the proposed metal shop addition was approved in FY 2021 budget. During the budget process, FY 2021, the governing board provided a cost analysis during staff budget presentations of the range of magnitude to construct the addition. Foresight Design and Construction provided the ROM cost of $646,035, which included a contingency of 15%, $96,905, a special permit allowance of $4,000, and the cost of payment performance bond, $6,451. The governing board deliberated and voted on a revised cost of $570,000 to be placed in the budget for approval. The governing board also voted that any additional project cost was to be funded by the Metal Shop Club. Please note that our club participation numbers reflect that the Metal Club throughout the COVID pandemic still maintains 540 active members. On an annual basis, the club provides over $25,000 on the maintenance and upkeep of all the tools and machinery operating within that facility. The Metal Club also provides a unique community need by assisting owner members with various types of repairs within the Sun City West homes, garages, fencing, their gates, and yards. The Metal Club also averages $14,000 in annual sales from the creation and replacement of vacation-oriented mailboxes as well as trash can lid coverings. Our facts and findings today: it was determined in FY 1920 that the Metal Club facility was operating in unsafe conditions along with a variety of easement violations. After committee review and the budget process, a decision was made to fund the renovations, providing the necessary safety remedies and mitigation of code and easement violations. On April 12, 21, CFO Pete Finelli received sealed bids for the Metal Shop addition. 5 professional general contracting firms were invited. 2 vendors provided qualifying sealed bids. 3 declined to provide proposals within the bidding timeframe due to pre-engaged projects or lack of subcontractor availability or lack of available materials. The $653,495 qualifying low bid has been fully vetted and is ready to be awarded to Derrick Builders. Due to a current long lead time material, Derrick Builders' proposal includes a time frame of acceptance by April 23, 2021. This time frame is needed to secure the necessary steel roof joist material availability and guaranteed to be available by September of 21. Any delay to these terms constitutes joist materials being delayed until January of 22, and a project cost increase due to delay in starting the project until November of 21. To date, I have invested $49,589.57 from the approved project funds for the development and delivery of architectural engineered plans, grading and drainage plans, county assessor parcel combining, Maricopa County required plan of development and pre-application process, our NESHAP permit asbestos report, the Arizona Fire and Medical Authority plan review and permit, as well as Maricopa County plan review and permit fees. Delaying this project would jeopardize the funding mentioned above, as the project would need to restart the permitting and plan review approval process. As you are well aware, the current economy is having an effect on the construction and manufacturing industry. This in turn is playing a key role in the deliverables needed to complete this project, primarily labor and materials. The additional funds being requested for this project can be found within the project savings of previously constructed projects within the approved FY 2021 capital budget. We have closed purchase orders totaling $2,819,838 in completed projects. Savings from those completed projects is $321,325. Approval of this project will not require any increase to the overall budget, but a transfer of funding within the current fiscal year's approved capital improvement fund. Conclusion, the qualified bid from Derrick Builders confirms the accuracy of the range of magnitude estimate provided by Foresight Design and Construction 1 year ago. No parameters of the metal shop's need have changed. The approval of the additional funds required to finalize the Rec Center's Sun City West builder agreement should be approved. All Maricopa County planning and development pre-construction requirements have been approved, along with all the requirements imposed by the Arizona Fire and Medical Authority. Our action being requested is the general manager is requesting additional funds from the capital improvement project savings within the FY 2021 budget in the amount of $133,100 to secure the agreement with the general contractor Derrick Builders for the Rec Center's Sun City West Metal Shop addition, allowing us to meet the April 23rd, 2021 deadline for availability and cost of materials. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Our process today is to determine whether we will approve moving this forward to the governing board. The governing board will take a look at this, as I believe, George, is that correct, on our meeting on Thursday, the 22nd? But this allows the Budget and Finance Committee to weigh in on whether we approve or do not approve of the action required. As Carl said, it is not additional funds from the budget. This will be taken from savings that we have already seen. So I'm going to open it up to questions. Harry, I'll start with you.
I guess the only comment I got is, as I read, when it was originally presented, the club was going to pay for a larger amount if that larger amount was requested.
That's my understanding.
And now, with the statement of 501c7, here again, as I discussed on the last thing, that can't happen. And so I think it's got to go forward because it needs to be done. It's a safety issue. And here again, as they say, either increase in dues to fund some money back, that's a whole project that's got to be worked on inside. But I think we got to do it.
Gary?
Carl, back to the very beginning, if the original cost was estimate was $646,000, why would the board have only approved $570,000? What was the conversation that resulted in that reduction?
The board was not, they weren't comfortable with a range of magnitude. It's not a true estimate, you know, it's where the estimators of a construction company are doing all of their diligences
Right.
over the disciplines. The 90,000 really kind of tripped them up, and bottom line said that the difference in that contingency, let's have me build it for $570,000, and if there was an overrun, ignoring the contingency, then the metal shop could pick up those costs.
Okay, so the bid for the current project is the $653,495.
That is correct.
And you need to take about 130,000 from your unspent capital spending to accommodate that number.
So over the 30-some projects, 28 approximately are completed, and we've established, a savings or underspending of 300+ thousand.
Right.
And that's where we're asking. We're not,
I get that, but if the job is 653 and you're using 133,000 from the contingencies, does that reduce the 653, or is that in addition to the 653?
no, that's within the 653. So total project cost from the builder, from the general contractor is 653. So 653,000 to build the building, and 49,000 has already been invested in all the preliminary things to get to the building.
So my the total project then is $780,000. Well, but that's what I'm saying. The 653 minus the 133, the project should be 520,000 then, roughly.
No. I apologize for, I'm trying to find, okay. So 653,000 from Derrick Engineering. I've already invested 49,000 for all the preliminary things.
Right.
So the grand total would be approximately $704,000.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's over 700,000 total project.
Correct.
All right.
John?
I don't like it, but I agree with Harry's comments. The die is cast, we're in, and we got to stay in the game.
Lisa?
Yeah, I agree with John. I mean, we're kind of backed against a wall now on this.
Okay.
And wait, I have one more question.
Sure.
Carl, do we have a spreadsheet or anything that shows us, you've given us where, that you have this one lump sum of where you've saved all this money, but do we have a spreadsheet that shows us
Absolutely.
where you've saved the money?
I believe Pete and I actually brought that with us.
I have that, Carl.
Okay.
I don't have the number, but roughly 40 or 50 projects. Lisa, they range from 49,000 was saved on one particular
I'm good, Pete.
roof
I'm
restoration.
good, thank you, yeah.
Lisa, so you know, per project PO application that Pete logs in, after all payments are made, then his spreadsheet tallies all savings per project for every single line item that's been approved in the budget. So,
Thank you, Carl.
welcome.
Any other comments or discussion? If not, I'll ask for the motion to move this forward, or a consensus to move this forward to the governing board. Bill, did you?
Just a quick comment that I'd like to get in the minutes anyway. Carl, if you want to talk about a little bit of the economic impact that we're facing as far as how we've been hit by this project, the increase in labor, the increase in materials that we're kind of facing. Again, one of the points I think that was in the narrative was that, the metal shops, really, their needs haven't changed. And so all we're trying to do really here is amend a series of easement situations that have taken place over the years, as well as some safety factors within this particular facility. And so, the war over funding this project had taken place over the last couple of years. We've gotten to that point, and now, the governing board did say we will authorize 570. Anything over that was the responsibility of the Metal Club. And I think everybody was on board with that, right? And then all of a sudden, we go out to bid, and unbeknownst to us or the metal shop, the price of metal, the price of labor, everything just boomed. It's kind of like a lining up of the stars type thing. And all the increases percentage-wise really have taken an effect on this particular project. And you're not to blame, the estimators are not to blame, the metal shop's not to blame, it just happened, right? And I think listening to you all make your comments, that no one likes to do this, right? But somewhat, what are we gonna do, right? It's a safety scenario. I think we really, really have to look out for our association, and thus the recommendation to move forward on this. And I want to take a little bit of the sensitivity out of the room, if, you know, and maybe just remove the word metal shop from this program. And because if it was any other capital project, be it a parking lot or being another building somewhere, I'm not sure it would have the same sensitivity that, because of what we went through the last couple of years as to, you know, this is what we're dealing with. It's just unfortunate, and I'm hoping we can get this thing moving forward and get this behind us.
And great question earlier too, Gary, about the grand total. 49,000, it's hard to tell what permit fees are exactly because it's based on a lot of factors. But I did ask the question to the vendor that provided us a bid, could he plug in a past date? Could he take his today's figures and base it off of some past things? So 15%, if we would have built 1 year ago, 15% was their low factor of what we've hit in inflation due to materials. So I was really pleased that Foresight, who helps us in a lot of ways, one, they've done 2 majors, the $4 million pool project and then all the Kuntz improvements last year. They were not available. They were too busy to provide a bid for this project, but for free, they gave us last year's homework, if you will, and their numbers were accurate. So I hope that helps.
Great that you got a relationship like that they'll work with you.
Well, I think what we need now is establish, John.
I would like to add to the to Bill's comments about taking some of the sensitivity out of this. I think his comments were well chosen. The fact that there is no scope creep in the job, I think is very important. And I remember the Zoom meet or the YouTube meeting on this that the board had. I believe it was in Palm Ridge last spring, and I remember the voting and the discussion that went around the table. And I think my sense was that the board wanted to protect the community from an overrun, and that's where they were talking about the metal club paying anything over. And I think I just sensed in the conversations it was concern about scope creep on the job more than the estimates of the labor and materials. I think we all know the boom that's going on. If anybody has had any personal construction or rehab work done in their houses, they know how busy all contractors are in the valley. This whole area is just booming. So I think, again, I'm echoing Bill's comments. I agree with them. And as long as this is just labor and materials, I'm on board.
Well, I think it's great that Lisa and Harry and John were all involved in this discussion last year. So probably have a good understanding of what it is. Any other comments, questions? Well, I'll ask for consensus to move this forward to the governing board.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. 4-0, consensus to move this forward to the governing board to use the overage funds on the capital equipment projects from this year to help cover the cost of the metal shop project.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments from the committee members? Harry?
I attended the Thursday budget meeting, which was very well attended by our community. There was more staff people here than members of the community. But one of the comments that Pete made is in the, and I know it's been approved going forward, but you brought up that there was either 130 or 150,000 to hire a long-range planning consultant. And I know when we discussed the budget, there was no discussion of that. And I was wondering, could you provide us some facts of what's on with that number?
130 to 150,000 for a long-range planning consultant.
Yes.
Is that what you're asking? Yes. Okay. So, 130 to 150,000 for a long-range planning consultant. And then 150,000 for a engineer.
I'm glad Bill's here. He may be able to amplify that. You're correct. I had sometimes it gets a little confusing of where I spoke these, but I believe at every one of the governing board updates, the budget as presented in February has modifications as we go. The one of most materiality was the one you're referencing, where we started to get the guidance from the workshop and/or governing board meetings where the master planning needed to move front and center and get accomplished. We have some components of this that we've approached last fall, and when we approached one of these consultants, the number was probably double that, if not more. And so we've reanalyzed that and identified some components we might be able to do internally, such as SurveyMonkey or surveys on space utilization, getting our own database and things like that. I don't know if that's and maybe Bill can speak to that, I don't know if that's a hard and fast number, but the outside consultant at half the price of what we was bid in the first go-around last fall, seemed like a prudent amount to at least put as allowance until we actually get bids on it.
I'm sorry. Specifically, we've been at this for a while. A couple of years ago, I landed here, and it was kind of at the end of a 2018 space utilization study that went out. We all know all of those dialogues and all of the clubs affected by that, and what was afforded as far as moving forward with our capital improvement program, providing facility space for clubs, enlarging some space, relocating some clubs. All of that has taken place, per se. And so it wasn't really ever finalized because there are still clubs out there seeking additional space. And where are we when it comes to this type of activity and behavior? So what we wanted to do a year or so ago was to really assess statistically and with live numbers and reality numbers of where are we? You know, we have 103 clubs chartered. And then there's a whole plethora of other groups out there that use our facilities for meetings and otherwise. So we were assembling all of that data, and we wanted to get good numbers, and we were on that process moving forward, and COVID hit. So the things basically shut down. And so moving forward, we'd like to take our numbers that we have collected, I think, from 2019, what we have collected from 2020, moving forward into this year, as we're looking at tennis court numbers and pickleball numbers and club use numbers and those types of things. Do we have the clubs in the right rooms, and can we do better things with them? So we're trying to put together a little bit of a space utilization plan on top of an overall master plan. We have, when it comes to IT, for instance, we have the vast majority of Katie's staff and Katie's equipment in closets without air conditioning and whatnot, because prior to, you know, when these facilities were built, IT wasn't thought of, right? The credit card didn't come out until 1980 and blah, 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 and here we are making do with what we've got. And so where are we going in the future was really the big question. And so we thought a master plan would be probably the best way to go. We're getting a little pressure and get some comments for what are we doing with the 53 acres that Maricopa County owns to the north of us that border the 303. Is anything going to happen with that project? The two golf courses in town here, be it Hillcrest and Cortobella, owned by the same individual. What's the future of those? We get a little bit of pressure. You know, are we going to be involved in looking at acquiring those? We have a contract with Briarwood on water usage that goes out for 20, 30 to 40 more years. So we've been negotiating with them on usage and what can we do with our water scenario. So everything really needs to be kind of brought in a little bit and really kind of assess, A, what we have, and B, who's using it, and the folks that are 40 years old now, potentially coming to move here, what do they want? And so we're just trying to put together some sort of a master plan for the next 10 years to give us a little bit of guidance as opposed to we don't really know. Because when I first got here, it seemed like every 15 minutes we were going a different direction on where people were going. We're going to build a building here, we're going to take this over, we're going to go buy a church, or there was no real plan, and that's not the greatest way to go. So hence, we attempted to put this thing together a year ago and had $75,000 budgeted. I put together an RFP for a proposal for professional planners to come in and give us a hand, and I got laughed out of the room when they came back and said, well, how much did you have budgeted? And it was like Pete said, it was, we couldn't even move the rock forward. So a little more money was needed. We get through COVID, and now we're looking, I think, 10 years down the road, where do we want to be? And that's the essence of the plan. Yeah. And then, again, it's all basically going to culminate into that. I don't know if it's going to take quite as long as that. Again, there are people that we know in the field that can really help us, and primarily focusing on local help. There are, within the state of Arizona and the metropolitan area down here, there are very, very qualified people doing master plans. They do them for cities all over the place, and so there's a little bit of an advantage there. There's not a whole lot of learning that has to take place. And I think with Katie's assistance and all the IT folks and all of our other staff that are accumulating data for us as we speak, a lot of that's done. It's just a matter of now assessing it and just moving that forward and talking to the people and getting out there and really hearing what people want. And we had that conversation, I think, the other day when it came to transportation. Does the governing board and do the people really want to focus on transportation in this plan? And that was in the original master plan proposal. But again, that was asked to be removed because it didn't have an importance enough to move that thing forward as we speak. So again, that'll save a little bit of money. And moving forward, let's focus on our needs.
Any other committee comments today? We're down to 4 members now, but we still have a quorum. Do I have any comments from our board members? President George, Director Maloney, any comments? Have we had any comments from our anyone who's been listening? Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody sticking with us for a very long meeting. Please don't forget that there is a committee appreciation brunch on Friday at Kuntz at 11:30. I hope you all will be there and be recognized for your service this year to your community. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.